Hi, Dr. Maslow, Dr. Link.
Hi,
Sarah here. How are you?
good. I
Good.
am looking to see what I need to click to change my background. How to do it from within.
If you hit the three dots on the side of your, sometimes that's how you do it. I don't know. That's what my kids tell me.
Yeah,
I think so. If you go to the video button on the bottom, like the bottom bar,
yeah.
there should be a little caret, like upward, up, like little arrow. And if
Well,
you
it
click
says share
that,
screen. No, that's
it's, there should be a little caret, and it should say change virtual background. But
no.
in any case, your background is fine with me. So.
I was gonna put myself at Parsley, but not if I
No
can.
problem. We're just going to wait. We're going to spend the next few minutes just waiting. There are some people kind of trickling in right now, so we'll wait a couple more minutes for people to sign on, and then we can get started.
Good. I'll work on my background in the meantime.
That sounds
Same. Didn't get a chance to really make one. But.
I do like your wallpaper though, Dr. Maslow.
Yeah. We finished this guest room like literally right before quarantine and social distancing started.
Well, it was good timing with all the Zoom meetings going on.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time in the guest room now.
Exactly.
Oh, here we go. Settings.
There we go.
Yeah. That's why you need to start things early.
That's right. You would never know that that's a virtual background. It looks like your kitchen or something.
Well, once you start to move your head, you
Yeah.
know. But it just popped me over to Parsley.
Let's see. That gave me the idea because I think I have one of Extend. Let's see if I can find it.
Dr. Link, are you in New York right now?
I sure am.
Nice. Very
Yeah.
cool. Are you guys back in the office, or are you still?
We are not.
Okay.
We are not. We're starting to do blood draws from the office, so we're kind of just slowly, very slowly opening, but basically no.
Okay. Gotcha. Oh, there.
No,
We see it again, Dr. Maslow. We just don't see you.
Yeah, it's not really working very well. Just like eyes and a nose.
That's okay. I also tried to do a virtual background, and it looked very similar to that, where you couldn't. I was basically like a floating head, and I think you need to update your computer software, which I just did not have time for. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll just have to do with that.
And Dr. Maslow, are you guys back in the office now?
We are back in the office.
Okay.
I've been going in like between 2 and 3 days a week.
Okay.
So I was actually in the office today and was not expecting there to really be traffic on the way home, but there actually was. I literally just walked in the door.
Quarantine's over and traffic is back.
Yeah, in the morning I haven't had any traffic at all, but
yeah, on the way back.
There's been a little bit of traffic.
Well, we're super excited to have you guys here. So
thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, guys. So I see that we've got some participants, some attendees signing on. Hi, everybody. We're really excited to have you here. We're just going to wait a few more minutes. We're expecting some more people, so I think we'll just wait a couple more minutes before we get started, and then we'll go through the schedule for tonight, and we can kind of jump in and start with our talks with our awesome speakers who are here. All right, everybody. For those of you who just joined, we're going to get started in just a couple minutes here. We still have a few people kind of uh, filtering in, so want to give people a couple minutes, and we should start within right around 5:35 here. Just so all attendees know, we had a question about being muted. You all are muted right now, but if any questions kind of come up throughout this conference, feel free to chat them to us. You'll have the ability to do so in the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. All right, everybody, let's get started. First of all, I want to thank you all for attending our first ever digital fertility conference. I'm so excited to have you all here. My name is Sarah. I'm head of partnerships at Legacy. For those of you who don't know, Legacy is the fatherhood company. So we focus on male fertility, and we provide men with a test that allows them to analyze and freeze their sperm from the comfort and privacy of their own home. One of our many goals is to help couples trying to conceive identify the root of their issues by offering in a test to allow them to kind of test early on in the family planning process. So again, we're really excited to have you here. We understand that fertility and family planning can be an incredibly complicated and stressful topic of conversation. You're not alone. There are 1 in 7 couples who struggle to conceive, and about 40% of couples that take 6 months or longer to try to get pregnant. So that this is all to say that having a baby is a much more challenging task than many people think. And on top of all that, we're in the middle of a global health pandemic, which I'm sure is contributing to a lot of stress and anxiety that we all kind of experience on a daily basis. So we decided to hold this conference for you, the Trying to Conceive community, to hopefully provide you with some reliable information from some of the leaders in the fertility and reproductive health space. As I'm sure a lot of you know, there's a ton of really bad information floating around out there. I've been in this space for a handful of years now, and even I don't know what to believe half the time. So hopefully tonight we'll all learn a thing or two from our awesome speakers who are going to be educating us on not only male and female fertility, but also on family planning and fertility improvement. So our speakers are not only amazing doctors, but great people. I've had the privilege of speaking with them before this conference, and they're all super excited to help out in any way that they can. So what I'd like to do is just quickly run through the planned schedule for tonight, and then we can just jump in. So we're going to start with a talk on nutrition and lifestyle with Dr. Lilli Link from Parsley Health. We'll then be speaking with Dr. Bat-Sheva Maslow from Extend Fertility on age-related fertility decline. And then we will end with Dr. Paul Turek from the Turek Clinic on helping aspiring parents through infertility. He is not here right now. He's literally in between or in procedures. So we're hoping that he'll be able to hop on in between procedures. But he'll hopefully be joining us around 6:25, 6:30 tonight. And then at the end, you'll have the opportunity to ask any questions with our, any questions that you didn't get addressed during the talk. We'll have about a 15 to 20 minute Q&A. You guys will all be able to ask your questions through the Q&A box down at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I'm hoping we'll be able to get to all of them, but for any of those that we're not able to get to, we'll follow up with you after the conference with as much information as possible. And then for any of you that need to hop off before the conference is over, just know that as a thank you for participating, we will be sending out an email over the next couple of days with a digital swag bag that includes discounts and promotions off of some of the service that our, that our partners are offering. So that it not only includes Legacy, but also Extend Fertility, Parsley Health, the Turek Clinic, Ava, the Fertility Tribe, and then also Robin. Cool. So let's get started. We'll start with Dr. Lilli Link from Parsley Health. Dr. Link, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Awesome, good stuff. Yeah. We're really excited to have you here. I think we'll start by, I'll just give kind of a brief rundown on your background, and then we can get into some of the questions that we have planned for tonight. So Dr. Lilli Link is a board-certified internist and functional health practitioner who graduated from medical school at the University of Chicago. So Dr. Link has many areas of expertise. Amongst those are cancer prevention, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disease, thyroid and adrenal health, digestive health, hormonal health and fertility. So the list goes on and on. Dr. Link is currently working with Parsley Health, which is a functional medicine and holistic healthcare practice. And tonight we'll be talking a little bit more about lifestyle and nutrition and the part that they can play in fertility and hormonal health. So again, Dr. Link, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I think I'd like to start by just learning a little bit more about functional medicine and what that is. Are you able to give us just a kind of a rundown on what that means?
Sure. So functional medicine is, I think it was twofold. One, it's holistic, meaning instead of thinking about just your uterus or just your sperm, we think about the whole body. And it also is looking for root cause of disease. So if it's infertility or hypertension or GI distress, why? Why is it not just treating the symptoms, but why did that happen? So if we can get to the underlying cause, we can potentially fix it, help you heal, so that the problem is you no longer have that health challenge.
Gotcha. So it's more so looking at kind of the root of the issue as opposed to just treating the symptoms, which is generally what like kind of traditional Western medical practitioners kind of focus on.
Right. That's how we're trained, right? To treat the symptoms, less to go to the root cause. Yeah.
And then it's my understanding that you originally were training to become a general medicine practitioner and then transitioned to functional medicine. Can you tell us a little bit about like why you decided to make that transition? What was the catalyst?
Sure. So I think if you speak to any functional medicine provider or holistic provider, I would say at least 90% of us, if not all of us, have some personal health challenge, whether it's ourselves or family or loved ones. And so that was the case with me as well. I was going along pretty conventionally on doing an internal medicine residency and then I was doing a general medicine research fellowship, and then I got cancer.
Mhm.
And it was a pretty aggressive and scary time. It's aggressive cancer and a scary time. And so I did conventional medicine, but I was statistics alone. So that's when I really started to tap into what else could be done. And so that's when I started to think about what could, lifestyle, diet and lifestyle, what could we do in that direction? And then I still didn't know about functional medicine because this was 20 years ago. But then somewhere, and then I started practicing and learned about functional medicine and discovered that I did not need to reinvent the wheel, that somebody already invented the wheel, and that I could join this community that had all this knowledge already.
That's awesome. That's a really inspiring story. And I think it's so great that you were able to kind of use your experience to guide your career. And obviously it makes a lot of sense that you want to help other people do that. So what is Parsley Health? And, would love to hear a little bit more from like a functional medicine lens, like how you kind of have this conversation of fertility with your clients at Parsley.
So Parsley is a national provider of holistic, personalized healthcare.
Okay.
So we have virtual care. So not only do we have offices in New York and California, but we have virtual care almost throughout the country. We're aiming to be out throughout the country soon. And we're really providing this holistic care that is individualized to what the person needs and not just, kind of cookie cutter. So, and so what we do for people who come through to Parsley Health, whether it's for fertility or for any reason, is we spend over an hour with them trying to understand them as individuals from literally before they were born to when they showed up at our door. And we do really in-depth testing. So whether it's in-depth blood testing for sure, and then some other specialized in-depth testing, so we can understand really, again, root cause of what's going on with them.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's not that level of care. I mean, just in my own experience, is not something that you typically get when you go to the doctor. So, so then if you have patients that come in, whether it be just a female or a couple, and they're talking to you a little bit more about kind of fertility and family planning and wanting to start a family, what do you typically kind of talk about with them? What are the most important points that you make sure to kind of emphasize when you're having that conversation?
So usually it's individuals. People don't come as couples.
Okay.
Though I could see, I have a couple entire families that I see with kids and so on. But usually we're speaking to one person at a time, and it's starting with for fertility, you want to understand, like if it's a woman, you want to understand what's going on with her periods. Does she have normal periods? Is she generally healthy? What's her blood sugar? What's her toxin load? How does she feel? That's kind of, and then of course, anyway, that's kind of the gist of where we would start. And with men, I mean, it's not exactly the same, obviously, but we want to make sure that everybody who's ready to start to get pregnant is in optimal health.
Okay, gotcha. So that's kind of the starting ground, is making sure that everybody, like, just on the surface, everybody seems healthy and there's no kind of underlying issues, because that can affect hormonal health and fertility.
Right.
Okay.
So, because we get, a common common health challenge that we get is people have PCOS, so they don't have very frequent periods, or they've been on the pill and they just haven't gotten their period back at all, or they have thyroid issues, so their periods are off. So that's a common issue that we see, is that women just don't have regular periods, and that's something we try to help them with.
So how often are those, in those situations, whether it's PCOS or irregular periods or whatever it is, how often are those situations like irreversible? Or oftentimes is it something where you're able to help them kind of put into place some sort of plan, whether that be through diet or lifestyle or, exercise, and they're able to kind of overcome those issues? And I know it's case by case.
Right. So I'm not saying that every person who comes in wants to get pregnant and has been having trouble is successful, but pretty much, I mean, people with PCOS, I would say very successful in helping them regulate their period so that they're getting having more regular periods. And with people who haven't gotten their period, you know, let's say in the past year or even 2 years or 3 years, I would say we're also quite successful in helping them get their period back. Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. I've spoken with a lot of women and couples trying to get pregnant, and oftentimes, you know, this is a hot topic of conversation because obviously, if you don't have regular cycles or if you're not getting a period, you tend to think that you're going to need reproductive assistance, right? And a lot of times, doctors will just put you on the pill or, you know, try to do something to kind of induce a period. But not necessarily look at like the actual root of the issue. Right. So I know so this is something that I want to focus on because we got a lot of questions from attendees around, you know, people are super interested in kind of lifestyle and nutrition. And I know that it's case by case and it's not a one size fits all, but as far as lifestyle goes, if for a couple trying to conceive, what do you typically recommend? What kind of like lifestyle changes do you typically recommend that, you know, they make in order to, you know, be ready to conceive?
So I wanted to say like that you could easily get overwhelmed by things to do, but if you just think of the umbrella concept that you want to eat and live cleanly, that you will have, that's really the gist of it. So people shouldn't, you know, you can get overwhelmed thinking about, I need to check off this box, this box, this box. But truthfully, the big picture is you just want to eat well and take good care of yourself. I mean, it's not really rocket science. So, but to start at the beginning, you want to think about what's going into your body. And there are two general categories of things that I think about for this. So it's toxins and, well, three categories: toxins, foods that are not healthy for you, and then foods that are healthy for you. So from a toxin perspective, you know, we know that when you are taking in estrogen mimicking chemicals like the phthalates and the BPAs that are kind of pervasive, especially in plastics and so on, you can be literally hindering your ability to get pregnant. So walking around with a plastic water bottle all the time is a simple thing that you can change. Then there are, of course, like heavy metals that, you know, that are used, your water purified. Are you careful about the fish you're choosing? There are all sorts of ways that you can be careful about those kinds of toxins as well. Then there's the food that you want to be careful about. So in general, women and probably men are much more fertile if their blood sugar is well regulated. So that means that you want to be at a healthy weight, and you want to be not eating a lot of carbohydrates that are raising your blood sugar, raising your insulin level, because a high insulin level is going to interfere with how your ovary works. So those are the general foods that you want to be careful to minimize: the sweets, the simple carbohydrates, and then there are the foods.
And sorry to interject. What about, because I've had this question a lot, what about soy? Because I've heard that it's kind of a phytoestrogen, right, for women, and it could kind of like hinder, you know, like kind of hormonal functioning and health.
Right. Great question. I'm not aware of studies that show that there's decreased fertility related to soy. So there's soy, and then there's soy. So you can be drinking soy milk, eating textured vegetable protein, which is like barely soy, you know, it's like barely related to its original form. And so that's not such a great idea, but eating the less processed soy like tempeh, edamame, miso, tofu, I'm not aware of any problems with doing that. It can be a really good source of plant-based protein. I wouldn't suggest having it daily, but having it a few times a week I think is totally fine. Okay. And I think that the concern that you are like it's estrogen mimicking, I don't think is related, as far as I'm aware, it is not related to fertility.
Gotcha. Okay. So general consensus is if the food is like, you know, generally healthy for you, something that you would want to eat for your overall well-being, it's probably pretty good for your reproductive health.
Right. Okay. And especially you want to be eating foods that are nutrient dense. So So really foods that are high in antioxidants, and that is vegetables, fruits too, but of course fruits are sweet. So you don't want to be just heavy on the fruits. You want to be heavy on the vegetables, lighter on the fruits.
Okay, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And are there, so you were about to kind of get into the foods that may, okay, so those are the foods that are good for you, and then the ones you had mentioned, ones that probably aren't the best.
I mean, the other, just generally what's like the little research that's done with diet and fertility points to a Mediterranean diet. So basically foods that are, so it's vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, beans, whole grains, fish, olive oil.
Yeah.
It's the stuff, and this is where it's not rocket science, right? It's like what's healthy for you in one way is healthy for you in another way. So
it's all related.
Not like I need to eat this diet for fertility and I need to eat, it's all related and very similar. So that's what's helpful.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. And so what do you say to clients who come in who are asking about maybe like caffeine or alcohol intake, and how important is it to stay away from those? I feel like people tend to think that they're just terrible substances and you can't touch them when you're trying to start a family and conceive. And so how true is that?
So again, it's based on studies that are, not randomizing people to you drink, you don't drink, and let's see who does better.
Yeah.
But generally observational data shows that if you are drinking about 14 or more than 14 servings of alcohol a week, so basically more than 2 drinks a night, or binge drinking, so for a woman 4 drinks in a night, or a man 5 drinks in a sitting, you're going to decrease your ability to get pregnant. And also, of course, once you're pregnant, you don't want to be drinking like more than just minor amounts of alcohol. And then the caffeine may be increasing your risk for miscarriage. So so some studies show even small amounts of caffeine are increasing your risk for miscarriage. I'm not aware of a relationship between getting pregnant and caffeine.
Yeah, more so something that you want to stay away from when it's confirmed that you.
Yeah, caffeine can interfere with how your liver metabolizes estrogen. So it does get involved in your
Dr. Link?
You would think that it could be connected.
Dr. Link, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Oh. What happened?
Yes,
I do. You don't hear me?
Sorry about that. No, I can hear you.
No, I tried to chat you and I can't send a message to you. So
this is, working from home problem.
I know.
Okay, great. Yeah, that all makes sense. And so you had also mentioned, like kind of toxic load and chemicals in the environment, phthalates and BPA and stuff like that. We do have a question from one of the attendees asking if we're able to test for toxin load through like a blood test.
Oh, it's such a good question. So I don't know if our attendees are also in New York, but New York is trickier than every other state when it comes to these things. So I don't, as far as I know, I can't do that in New York. We don't at Parsley in the New York office test for some of these other chemicals. We can check for heavy metals in your blood, and we can check for them in your urine. But for those sorts of things, I don't think New York State allows that kind of test. It's a big hassle, but I think my colleagues in other parts of the country are able to do a more full kind of toxin panel like that.
Gotcha. Okay, so it may or may not be like regulated in some places, but like
it's just exist. New York. Okay. New York makes the labs go through such hoops to do testing that some of them do and some of them don't.
Okay, gotcha. But that type of test does in fact
exist.
Okay, great. So, and then kind of switching gears from nutrition, would love to talk a little bit about stress specifically, especially in today's environment, and kind of the part that you believe, just in your experience with clients, kind of the part that plays in family planning and trying to conceive.
Yeah, stress is an interesting one. So the evidence more or less points to stress for both the man and the woman having some negative impact on being able to get pregnant. Anecdotally, I think of this one woman who was trying for 3 months, of course, really wanted to get pregnant, and it wasn't working. And so she said, and this month my husband and I decided we're just not going to try this month. And of course, that was the month she got pregnant.
Of course,
So,
yeah,
but you hear
that
those
so many times.
I know, and those stories are so annoying for the people who are like, I'm trying to deal with stress and I'm still not getting pregnant. And so, I think that it's almost like that kind of can make a person pretty upset and angry just to think about it. I think that, we can all do well to meditate, walk in nature, journal, play music, do anything that we really kind of just takes us a little bit out of the everyday life stressors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just good for us. But just to be told, don't be stressed is so not productive. But but the short of it is there does seem to be a correlation.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know there are so many stories that just basically are people saying, just relax, like go to acupuncture, do yoga, try to minimize the amount of stress in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much easier said than done.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's super helpful. So I know we only have a couple more minutes here. There are some questions that some of the attendees submitted before the event that I just wanted to make sure to address.
Right.
Do you have any idea, like any other kind of like lifestyle changes besides things that are nutrition related and like stress related that you would recommend for a couple that's trying to start a family?
Mm-hmm.
Whether exercise or anything like that.
Right. I mean, there are certainly a few things to think about. So exercise is great. Not too much, not too little. Like really intense exercise for a woman, actually, you can lose your period. For a man, that also can decrease your sperm. So not too much intense exercise, but moving is really important. For men, wearing boxers and not briefs, not carrying your cell phone in your front pocket, those sorts of things seem to be helpful.
Yeah.
For women, being aware of your cycle, knowing, when you're fertile and knowing what, the vaginal discharge looks like at this point versus that point in your cycle can, all be helpful to just know your body.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it sounds like such a simple thing, but it's something that women are not really taught. I certainly never knew about that until I started working in this field.
Right.
Are there any like kind of tools or apps or, things that can help with kind of ovulation or cycle tracking that you would suggest?
Yes, I mean, there are definitely apps out there, a number of apps out there that people choose to use that will keep track of where your period is and where you are with your the different types of vaginal discharge. I don't have a specific one necessarily to recommend, but for people who are interested, you can really learn a lot. You can go to somebody who can really instruct. If you want to really understand when's your most fertile time, you see somebody who specializes in that sort of thing, or you just really spend time like getting to know your body.
Yeah. It takes time. It's not a quick, easy kind of overnight fix.
Right.
It's a lot of educating yourself and making sure that you understand your body and the different phases and stuff like that.
Right. But just the beginning of understanding that what's coming out onto the toilet paper actually is meaningful, like not something to be ignored, but something actually it's a helpful piece of information.
Yeah, it's important to be aware of that stuff. And I'm sure there's so many materials and websites and blogs and books out there that people can read to kind of educate themselves on that.
Right.
Okay, great. And do you have typically, like one or two pieces of advice that you give to, clients or patients that you see when they're frustrated and they're kind of struggling with this process?
Yeah, I do, which actually has to do with my personal story. So with, I guess, revealing all, as a cancer survivor, I was I was infertile because of surgery and chemotherapy, but desperately wanted to have kids. And so my husband and I got a lot of help from somebody to carry and somebody to donate eggs and all of that. And my point in saying that is that if you are determined to have a child, you will get there. And so, you know, you may not need to use an egg donor, you may not need to use a carrier, but the point is the solution is there. And so I want you to be 100% confident that as long as you want this, you will make it happen in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's such great advice. No, like, two family planning journeys kind of look the same. And I think it's really frustrating for people who are going through this process, who are, you know, struggling and seeing other people around them who might not be having the exact same experience. But to your point, there are so many different kind of paths, avenues that people can take these days. Reproductive, like, advancements have been incredible over the past couple of decades. And, you know better than anybody that it allows, you know, couples of all shapes, sizes, forms to kind of achieve their goals. So I think that that's a really good, a good piece of advice. Great. Good. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Link. This has been super helpful. Like I said, we had a ton of questions prior to this conference about lifestyle and nutrition, how that might affect fertility and hormonal health. So, and I think what's so great about this topic is that it's actually something that you are able to control, which is not always the case with, you know, fertility. So, can you guys hear me? I think we froze again.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Okay. I'm in the process of moving rooms because obviously this one is not, you know, working the way that I want it to. Okay, great. Awesome. So I think we will switch gears to Dr. Maslow. Dr. Link, thanks again for all of that. That was super helpful. Great. So Dr. Maslow.
There you are.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, but we didn't get the last 2 minutes.
I switched rooms, so hopefully this will prove to be a better place for something like this. All right, great. So Dr. Maslow, hey there. It's great to see you.
Yeah.
Good. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background on you and your experience, and then we can dive into some of the questions around age-related fertility decline and egg freezing, and you know, those types of things.
Sure.
Cool. So Dr. Maslow is a reproductive endocrinologist and fertility specialist. She attended Albert Einstein College of Medicine, earning her medical degree with distinction in reproductive endocrinology. Dr. Maslow is also the director of research at Extend Fertility, which is a premier egg freezing and IVF clinic in New York City that focuses on making these types of services more accessible to patients. And also offering a superb customer experience. So I am personally really excited to have Dr. Maslow here. Not only is she a fantastic doctor, but a good friend as well. I worked with the Extend Fertility team for a couple of years back when I lived in New York. And so, you know, they're not only great doctors, but just amazing people. So great to have you here, Dr. Maslow.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you again, Sarah.
I know. Good to see you too. So we're going to really dive into age-related fertility decline and kind of, you know, discuss the part that age plays in conception. And so I think what I would like to start with is just by learning a little bit more about your work at Extend Fertility, if that's okay.
Sure. So Extend Fertility was started really primarily to the need of the fact that there were many women who were interested in having children, wanted to have a family, but typically because they didn't have a partner, but whatever it was, their life circumstances didn't allow them to have a baby right now. And recognizing that there really is a significant age component, so that if you really want to have a child, the longer you wait, the more you may be handicapping yourself in terms of that observation. And the newest data and the newest technologies that are available that allow for fertility preservation have really given rise to this opportunity for women to preserve younger eggs that have a higher chance of being successful should they need infertility treatments in the future. And it was a growing field, but one that really wasn't being addressed well by the general IVF practice. The general IVF practice is really focused on couples who are trying to conceive, and fertility preservation and education, and really arming women with the knowledge that they needed to have about what happens to their body before they become diagnosed with infertility just wasn't a priority. So something's happening with my microphone apparently.
Hey, Dr. Maslow, it looks like we're getting...
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
I can hear you. It's better now. Let's see. I just want to make sure that it is.
No, I just got a thing that popped up that said your microphone is not working,
Okay.
but now it's
Yep.
okay.
Yep, less distorted.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Not sure why that happened. I'm going to put my face much closer to the screen, and hopefully the microphone will pick up better. So I apologize for the image, but hopefully the sound will be better.
There we go.
Essentially, the primary goal of Extend Fertility is to really focus on the education component and being able to arm women with the knowledge and understanding of what happens to their fertility before an infertility diagnosis comes into play. So we know that infertility rates go up as women get older, but what really happens up until then, and being able to empower women to understand that knowledge, both because they may want to take a proactive step like freezing their eggs, or because when it comes to conceive, it really pays, just like Dr. Link said, to really understand their cycles and understand what components go into effect. That's really the basics of how we built Extend. And what happened is we've grown into this practice where we're doing thousands of egg freezing cycles a year. We've really had almost 5,000 women come through our doors in the past few years.
Wow.
And we've expanded to also have fertility, the sort of broader spectrum of fertility treatment. Because one, we have couples who are coming back, or women who are coming back to use their frozen eggs. And we also recognize that the model that we have is useful and valuable even to couples who are trying to conceive. And so we've expanded that with kind of the same ethos, the same knowledge and education base, and accessibility, right? We really, one of the things we pride ourselves on is trying to keep our price points on the lower end of the market so that it's really accessible to as many.
Hey, Dr. Maslow?
Yeah.
Okay, good. You cut out a little bit there, but so no, not at all. I think it might be my reception, but so it sounds like Extend Fertility was kind of primarily focused on just providing these types of services to women who wanted to be proactive about their reproductive health by freezing their eggs. And you've since expanded to like full-blown IVF services where you're actually helping couples actively trying to conceive.
Correct. Yeah. Now we have a pretty decent sized IVF practice, but and we have kind of two separate pathways that are really dedicated to those two different groups of patients that we see.
That's terrific. Wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit more about how the part that age plays in fertility? Specifically, I know you focus mostly on women. So, we can kind of start there on kind of age-related fertility decline and considerations that women should have maybe when they're like a little bit younger or not ready to have a family, but they know that they might want to kind of have a family at some point in the future.
Yes. So there's really two ways in which female fertility is affected by age, and ways in which men and women are different. But women, and so as we age, we lose those eggs, and eventually we run out when we go into menopause. Am I still audible? Like, can we
No,
still hear me?
you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Don't mind me. I'm just trying to find the best place in my house where, where I can actually get some good Wi-Fi here.
Okay. So women are born with all the eggs we'll ever have. Eventually we run out when we go into menopause. And that in and of itself, sort of the decline in quantity of eggs, is one aspect of fertility, but often actually really not the most important aspect. Like a couple of times conceive, or a woman is trying to conceive, there's really one egg that's selected at random each month to be available for pregnancy. And if that's a good quality egg, which we define as an egg that has all the necessary chromosomal parts, so all the right chromosomes it's supposed to have, that's a month in which someone could conceive. And if that's an egg that's abnormal, doesn't have all the right chromosomal parts that it's supposed to, and that's typically a month in which someone won't conceive, because these abnormal eggs typically they just don't work. And as we get older, because the eggs live inside of us, over time, more and more of the eggs start to develop these abnormalities. And therefore, sorry, I guess I'm not being heard well. Sarah, you're muted.
Okay, so it seems like it might be yours, Dr. Maslow.
Hold
I've
on.
tried every room in my home right now, and so.
Let me see if I move somewhere else, if I'll be heard better. Is that better?
That is better, yep.
Okay.
All right, so can we, it might have been, can we rewind a little bit just to, I believe you were talking, yep, so I think if we could actually start from the beginning there, that would be helpful.
All right, so there's two ways in which female fertility is affected by age. One is the number of eggs that we have. Over time, we lose our eggs and we go into menopause. Where we are on sort of our way towards menopause is one aspect of our fertility, but really not the most important aspect when it comes to trying to conceive. Because ultimately, the body is going to select a single egg at random each month to be available for pregnancy. And if that's a good, meaning it's an egg that has all the right number of chromosomes, then that's a month in which somebody's potentially able to conceive. Mm-hmm. But if that's an egg that doesn't have all the right chromosomes, if that's an abnormal egg, then that's a month in which someone likely wouldn't conceive. And what we start to see is that as women get older, more and more of the eggs start to develop these abnormalities where they have either too many or too few chromosomes. And so what happens is that naturally over time, more and more of the months are months in which someone won't conceive. And so what you start to see, and this is not something pathologic, meaning it's just a normal part of getting older, is that the time to conception, the number of months that it takes, will go up as women get older. Mm. And along with that, we'll also start to see that the rates of infertility go up as women get older, because we define infertility as having tried to conceive for a year without success. So as women get older, more and more of these women are going to have gone 12 or more months with abnormal eggs that come out and have not been able to be successful. Along with that, these abnormal eggs do sometimes further marriage. So you do start to also see that as women get older, the rates of miscarriage increase. But the sort of flip side of that is that the healthy eggs, even though more of the eggs have become abnormal, the ones that remain healthy, that have the right number of chromosomes, are just as good at 42 as they were at 32 or 22. There's just fewer of them around. And that's why women in their late 30s and early 40s can and do have healthy babies all the time. But it can be more challenging. And so when we think about how to plan family planning in terms of when you might want to conceive, for those women who are thinking about conceiving later in their, let's say, late 30s or early 40s, recognizing that there are some challenges, some choose to be more proactive and potentially think about doing fertility preservation or egg freezing. What that allows you to do is to, let's say, freeze eggs at 34 or 35, so that if at 39 or 40 or 41, you find yourself in a position where you need infertility treatments, or like IVF, for example, your chances of success with infertility treatments at 39, 40, 41 are going to be directly related to the age of the eggs that are being used. So if you get to use 35-year-old eggs instead of 40-year-old eggs, then you've essentially more than doubled your chances of success.
That's so
That's the
interesting.
rationale.
Yeah. So it's basically like the way that you can kind of think of it as you are operating as your own egg donor, right? So you are you're donating your younger eggs to your older self.
Correct. So yeah, women who get to a point where they're no longer able to conceive with their own eggs. And the truth is that every woman's going to reach a point in her life where she's no longer able to conceive with her own eggs. But not every person's going to be attempting conception at that time. But if you are at a point where you're unable to conceive with your own eggs, many women will rely upon donated eggs from other typically much younger women. Here you have an extra opportunity to potentially get pregnant with your own eggs, and that you've really basically done it to yourself, you mentioned.
Gotcha. Okay. So it sounds as though, what you had said before, Dr. Maslow, is that as women age, egg quality and quantity tends to decline. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not, I want to qualify that it's not this and it's this awful, terrible thing and nobody's getting pregnant. It's not true. Many women.
Dr. Maslow,
losing you again.
Yeah, it tends to be, I think, a little bit better, like the slower I think you speak.
I speak too quickly.
No, it's not that. I think it's just a mixture of things.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we qualify that it's not this kind of doom that everybody's going to experience infertility and you can't get pregnant when you're in your late 30s and early 40s. I mean, many couples and women are able to conceive in their late 30s and early 40s without issue. But it's about sort of hedging your risk and understanding that there is a risk as we get older, and really recognizing, this is the same reason why we talk about when to come in for an infertility evaluation, right? So typically we define infertility as having tried for a year without success, but for women who are older than 35, the recommendation is to come in for an evaluation after 6 months, not because the diagnosis is different, but because time is a little more precious. And you don't want to be, if there's something really obvious or something that comes up on the testing, you want to be able to catch it earlier rather than later, because time is more precious as you get older.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. That makes a lot of sense. And so I think, what I'm hearing from you is that, fertility tends to decline with age. However, there's this stat that's kind of floating around that's basically, once you hit age 35, your fertility drops quite significantly. And it sounds like while that may be true in some cases, it's really case by case, and it's not, turning 35 doesn't necessarily mean that you can no longer conceive naturally.
Yeah, certainly doesn't mean that you can't naturally. And, your ovaries don't know your birthday. It's not like you wake up on your 35th birthday and something magically happened to your ovaries. There's a few reasons why 35 gets a bad rap. One of them is that we talked about quality. So when you're in your late 20s and early 30s, really the majority of your eggs are still chromosomally normal. And 35 is the age at which that flips, right? So 35 is the age at which like 50% of the eggs are healthy and 50% of the eggs are not. And so 35 and over, you're at the point where more than half of the eggs or most of the eggs that you have are abnormal. So that's one way it gets a little bit of that rap. The other is that the slope of the decline is not a straight line. So the line, the both quantity and quality, you sort of see that in the early 30s, it's like a slower rate. And then at the early, late 30s, it gets faster. And in the 40s, it gets even faster.
Okay.
So 35 is a little bit of an inflection point, but it is by no means this cliff that people are afraid of.
Okay. Yeah. And so one question that we got, Dr. Maslow, from a couple attendees before the event is there a way to kind of test for people who are considering IVF or egg freezing, is there a way to test for, egg quantity and egg quality prior to undergoing those procedures?
That's a great question. So egg quantity, we have some pretty good tests available. They're by no means perfect, But the best markers of egg quantity or egg supply are a hormone level called AMH, or anti-Mullerian hormone. That's a hormone that's produced by the egg supply. So the more eggs you have, the higher that hormone level is going to be.
Right.
And there's some pretty good data about what are sort of typical AMH levels by age, but it's highly variable, meaning at any given age, you're going to have some women who have a high AMH, some women have a low AMH, and pretty much everywhere in between. And it's not so predictive of pregnancy. Actually, there's some really good studies to show that it's, in the short term, really not predictive of pregnancy. So someone with a very low AMH may ultimately have no trouble conceiving, and there are some women who have very high AMHs who may have trouble conceiving. So that tells us about the egg supply, but really doesn't tell us much about the egg
Whether or
quality.
not people can actually conceive.
Exactly.
And so is there a way to screen for egg quality?
Unfortunately, not really. Egg quality is really very tied to age, and so we often make assumptions about someone's egg quality really based on their age, and sort of IVF pregnancy outcomes based on age, because it's sort of a corollary of egg quality.
Yeah.
When people are, once you get to the point where you're making embryos, so let me take one step back. Eggs themselves, you can't test the quality, because when we talk about quality, we're really talking about the DNA inside the egg, and an egg is just a single cell. And to test the DNA inside that single cell, you basically destroy that cell in the process. So you can't test the DNA inside the egg. Once there's an embryo, the fully formed embryo will have hundreds of cells, and you actually can test a few cells off the surface of the embryo without harming the embryo itself.
Okay.
So that's really where you can ultimately screen for quality. But beforehand, you really have to work under some assumptions based on female age.
Okay. Okay. So basically you can kind of, there's no way to screen quality of an egg, but you can kind of make some assumptions based on the age of the patient. And then once the embryo is created, there is some ways to kind of screen for quality, before kind of transferring to the uterus.
Exactly. We like to joke that the best test for egg quality is your birthday.
Yeah. Well, good, Dr. Maslow, thank you so much. I do have other questions for you that were ones that people submitted before the conference. I think we'll kind of bring those up and discuss them in the Q&A in about 20 minutes. But I think we'll switch gears and talk with Dr. Paul Turek, who just joined in. Hi, Dr. Turek.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Good. Just finished a very successful surgery.
That is good to hear. I know you're kind of in between procedures right now, so I appreciate you taking the time to jump on and chat with us. Good. So, Dr. Turek, I'll tell the attendees a little bit more kind of about you and your background, and then we can jump into the kind of
Guy stuff.
Let's talk about guys. I know we've talked a lot about women this conference, so.
Women are important, and that was a very important conversation about women should know about.
Yes, they are. But as we know, in fertility, men are just as important, but the conversation tends to kind of get brushed aside, or there's not as much awareness around it. So we're glad you're here to represent the men in the room.
The underserved.
Yes, the underserved. Good. So Dr. Turek, just so everybody knows, is an amazing person. We're very, very lucky because he is actually on the Legacy advisory board. So we're extremely blessed to have him, kind of part of our team. He is an internationally renowned expert in men's sexual health. He earned his medical degree at Stanford and is board certified by the American Board of Urology. He also has received countless awards for his work with male fertility and has provided super valuable research to the men's sexual health community. Lastly, he is founder of the Turek Clinic, which is kind of where I'd like to start. I would love to, in your words, Dr. Turek, hear a little bit more about the work that you do at the Turek Clinic.
So I was an old professor at UCSF for 15 years, and I worked out of a women's health center that was pink. And I was getting my patients in, and they walk in the door and say, "Am I in the right place? It's the UCSF Center for Women's Health, and it's pink. Is Dr. Turek here?" it was always this hesitation. It's pretty funny. But for that and 26 other reasons, I left academics. I felt a little like I hit a ceiling.
Mm.
And I had some big dreams I had to carry out, and I wasn't getting funded through them. So my wife actually said, "You should I'll set up your practice. Let's just leave." So I went to North Beach, where I am now, in San Francisco, and started the Turek Clinic in 2008. And since then, I'm still publishing papers. I'm still getting NIH grants. I'm still raising money. I have a free clinic for the working poor in San Francisco that I helped found and fund. And I'm getting a lot of my bucket list done now.
That's awesome. What's on your bucket list?
Well, I was surfing a little bit more for a while.
Yeah.
I'm spending more time with the kids,
All right.
believe it or not, because in academics,
very
you kind of go this way, like you get things done and you get more to do and you get more to do. And here I was like an endowed chair professor working from 6:30 to 9, and I'm thinking, am I supposed to have more time now? I mean,
Right.
and then I asked for more time, and I'm like, no, if you don't work, we don't make money. No, sorry. So
It's a balancing act.
I thought the top was going to be more fun, but it was harder. So I own my time more now. So that's very valuable. And then now we live in LA, and we moved to LA, and I have a practice there too. And I commute, which seems complicated, but honestly, I operate in both cities and see patients in both cities, and I take all my own call.
Wow.
For every surgery, just me, 24 hours a day, and I have a great life.
You are a busy guy.
Well, that's called organization.
That's called, or yes, exactly. You're good at compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
So Dr. Turek, I think your talk in particular will be very, very valuable to a lot of the attendees of this conference. We have a lot of men here, a lot of men who have used the legacy services. So would love to start just by learning a little bit more about kind of male fertility and male fertility decline. We learned from Dr. Maslow a little bit about kind of fertility and how age impacts female fertility, but would love to learn a little bit more about male fertility decline. What are the factors that kind of male fertility decline is attributed to, and what you think is important.
Sure, I'll start with, well, maybe the big question is male fertility declining?
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Not with age, but just in general. And the answer is, we don't really know.
Mm.
So what we know is that sperm counts, if you look at populations, tend to be dropping in certain developed countries, but not others. And people then extrapolate those things to mean that we're going extinct if we stay along the same line. There's good reason to believe it might be because of industrialization, exposures, obesity. So we're not cavemen anymore. Our lifestyle tends to be more sedentary. Yeah. Manual laborers have more fertility, are healthier, et cetera. We're not as healthy as a species for lots of reasons. So there's reason to believe it. But we had met at the NIH at a study group, and the question we met to talk about from around the world was 2016. It's in a blog, Turek Clinic, Turek on Men's Health. And it was about, is human fecundity changing, right? So the word is fecundity, and fecundity means the potential.
Can you define that? Yeah. What does it mean?
The potential to conceive.
Okay.
So birth rates are not really a measure of fecundity, although they're a measure of fertility, which is your actual conception rate, right? So you can't use birth rates to do that. There's a lot of things you can't use to measure that. But the point was, there's definitely lower birth rates in industrialized nations, Europe, Japan, America. A mathematician among us basically stated what Dr. Maslow was stating, was that if you just account for family planning by women, intentional family planning and delaying childbirth, that alone could account for any changes in birth rate in the industrialized world.
Wow.
So just mathematically.
Yeah.
If you just, a woman delays 5 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So interesting. So we heard all the arguments, and the answer, it's published now in Human Reproduction paper, and it's a commentary, and basically says, we don't know. It's really hard to tell whether human fecundity is changing. We know birth rates are changing. We know all that. We know it's higher in Africa. We know it's lower in industrialized countries. We know that there's delayed childbearing and all that stuff. But fecundity is different, right?
Yeah.
So I would say I'm not convinced yet.
Yeah.
You know, I look at women who are having menarche at 10, 11 years old, basically every generation getting a year less, wondering what's going on there. I mean, they're getting fertile faster. And is it because as a species we're protected, we're so nutritionally replete that, you know, God or Darwin is saying, you need to be fertile now because now's the time you're nutritionally replete and you're full, and this is a good time because it may never happen again, right? Because that's the way evolution works, or Darwin works. So it's a very complicated question, but I'm not convinced that male fertility is changing at all. I'm just not.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflicting information out there, which is why this is such a stressful and kind of overwhelming topic of conversation, right?
But it's not a safe place to be if you say it's not, right? Because if it is, you got to be prepared. So that's why I'm on legacy, right?
So Dr. Turek, tell us a little bit about kind of the services that you provide your patients. I know that, you know, this talk is supposed to be focusing on, you know, how you tend to help aspiring parents through infertility.
So I see my practice as taking care of the the underserved, because it really is. And I thank God that women are so good at their care and listen to these things, because, you know, more than half of the men who come into my office are dragged in by their partners.
Of course.
And so, and if you look at the big, larger data, again, in a blog, partnered men live 5 to 6 years longer in America than unpartnered men.
That's really interesting. It tends to be the women who are, they're typically the ones who are making the decisions about anything kind of healthcare related.
Right. So the key to men is educating their partners. It really is, because they'll do whatever and so when the guys they don't come in. I mean, they're like, I'm fine. I don't hurt, and nothing hurts, and I'm not. My life isn't threatened. I'm fine. And then, you know, after surgery, no one takes pain pills because they want to know what the pain's doing. Right? Okay. All right. But it's an odd species.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is not be in pink rooms. You know, women's health centers, you have to be a guy. And my practice, you know, above me is a surfboard on the wall. There's car pictures on the wall. You have to show them your personality. They have to trust you. Otherwise, they're not going to come in. You have to project a sense that you care. And what you find is if you do that, the book will open up.
Yeah.
And a university isn't a great place for that, but they'll open up and they'll tell you everything. And that's what you need to know. So I'm able to cure men because I listen to them, right? And 11-minute visits don't do it, especially with guys. So the first 11 minutes, they're scared out of their minds, right?
Right.
And then you go on. So it's a different species. They don't have monthly cycles. They don't know how to measure things. They don't know when they have a problem. I use the car analogy that it's an old car. It doesn't bend before it breaks. There's no warning signs.
Yeah.
The lights often don't work, and you have a problem. So the classic one for me is infertile couple, go to IVF because he has sperm, kind of a no-no for me. Fail, they think, well, let's see what's wrong. Maybe something's wrong with you. Your sperm count isn't normal. Come to me, I find testis cancer. Classic.
Interesting.
You know, that something's wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And I really appreciate what you're saying about, you know, taking more time to kind of listen to the patient, spend time with the patient, make sure that they feel comfortable with you. I think a similarity with all three, Dr. Turek, your practice, Extend Fertility with Dr. Maslow, and Parsley Health with Dr. Link, is that you guys all in some way are trying to redefine the patient experience by making this much more pleasant and empowering for people. And I think, Dr. Turek, what you're doing is that much harder because you're doing it with men.
So one of the things I published in 2009 that kind of took off was we showed that men with no sperm had higher risk of cancers later in life. Published it in General Medical Journals, 65,000 patient NIH-funded epidemiologic studies. Prostate cancer, testis cancer, and this is not around the time of infertility. This is after infertility, at least a year after, so unrelated to the infertility.
Right.
And that thankfully has led to NIH grants on the biomarker concept, because men need an ovulatory cycle. They need a menstrual cycle. They really do. It'd be great. So what's their menstrual cycle? Well, I don't have one, but you could probably use something to do with their fertility to reflect their health. And that was the concept. So Mike Eisenberg at Stanford's taken off with that. A group in Italy's taken off with it. Tom Walsh in Seattle's taken off with it. And now it's sort of accepted that infertile men aren't as healthy as fertile men, either concurrently with their infertility. They have higher comorbidities, so higher disease burden when they're infertile. Obesity is one of them, diabetes, one of them, blood pressure, cholesterol, etc. As well as going forward, they have more comorbidities.
Yeah.
They have more cardiovascular risk. They have earlier death rates. That's very complicated, potentially. And this is all epidemiology, so it needs confirming. And they have higher cancer rates.
Yeah.
So this, unfortunately, this finding may be the way we turn this around, because I see myself not as much of a fertility doctor right now as a men's health doctor who's got my foot in the door when they're 30 instead of when they're 60.
Yep.
So I can make that change, stop them from smoking, get them to lose weight, get the blood pressure under control at 30. I have saved their lives. I've added 10 years to their life, and they have no idea that that's my chief thrill.
Yeah, it's
no idea.
I mean, it's going back to what we were talking about with Dr. Link at the beginning of this conference. It's all related, right? You know, if your you know, sperm is not, you know, if you get a sperm analysis done and it shows that you are, you know, have low count or quality, it's very likely that there are other things going on in the body as well. So kind of going off of that, Dr. Turek, you started talking about like weight management and, you know, stopping smoking cigarettes and stuff like that. What would you suggest to a client who comes in to see you, who has, you know, low sperm count, low sperm motility, and they're wondering kind of what they can do in order to improve their sperm health? What would you recommend for that?
I tell them, think of your testicles as an engine that wants to run hard. And the only thing you can do wrong is slow it down. Because if you leave it alone, it'll run at full RPM, full steam, all the time, 1,000 sperm per heartbeat. But if you do things to it, you'll slow it down. So hot tubs slow it down. Fevers, illnesses slow it down. Obesity slows it down. You know, pot, tobacco, alcohol in excess slows it down.
All the fun stuff.
Yes. So, you know, but not in moderation, right? But, you know, in extremes, a lot of it in extreme. But that stuff is, you know, think of yourself as a caveman, right? Your diet can slow you down.
Interesting.
Right? And so what diet do you do? Well, we're 100,000 years away from cavemen. We're not really that different. I don't feel that different. And what do they do? I mean, they were foraging, you know, paleo diet. Look at the paleo diet. It's fabulous. Mediterranean diet, 333 generations later. Fabulous. It's good for everything. And the other concept is you got to think of fertility as a reflection of health and not independent of it. So I gave this lecture at Google in 2011 that said that sexual health is not an orbiting moon around the planet of health. It is the planet. It is a reflection of the planet. It's part of the planet. So well, I love it when a guy looks at his sperm count and says, my sperm count's low, I got to figure out what's wrong, you know. And some people want their sperm count higher and it's already high, and it's like, that's not what's going on. I mean, you're fine, right? But anything can do it. So I just think these are all dents and performance enhancers. So my advice is, you know, pretend you're running a marathon or training for a race or something.
Yeah.
You got to treat your body like it's a temple.
Yep. That's a great point. It's a great point. It's, you know, it's basically, you know, you, from kind of what I'm hearing from you is you are born with, your body wants to operate the way that it should. And so you just need to make sure that you're treating it well. And so, Dr. Turek, do you typically recommend any sort of kind of supplements or vitamins to men who are interested in improving their fertility or sperm health? I know there's a lot of conflicting information on this.
That's a tough bailiwick, but
Yeah.
now I have a disclosure. So I run a supplement, okay? It's called alphasperm.com.
Okay.
There's my disclosure.
So yes,
So
you
yes,
do.
I believe in it. So here's the data.
Mm.
Oxidative stress is a big part of fertility and infertility. Ovulation is an oxidative event. It's an inflammatory event, right? The egg fertilization process is an inflammatory event, just on a molecular level, okay? So oxidative states matter enormously, especially with sperm. Sperm are little, very, heartily packed nuclei of DNA surrounded by mitochondria, 75, engines, little engines and stuff. Very susceptible. It's like having the engine in the back seat of your car. It's hot, it's running hard, etc. So it's a lot of stress, oxidative stress. Our diets are oxidant poor. And so it makes sense from a biological point of view that there would be a lot of oxidant related infertility. And antioxidants are typically vitamins A, C, E, and certain mineral nutrients, etc. So that's sort of the biology, which kind of makes sense. And it's well funded, it's well recognized and known.
Mm.
But when you look at supplements, they're not doing that well for men, like other things. Like if you look at antioxidants for cancer, the NIH set up an antioxidant arm or a complementary arm. They put $1 billion into studies. None of them really panned out, and vitamins got an F. They helped, I think ginseng helped post chemotherapy nausea, but for prostate cancer, vitamin E, selenium, there's a bunch of studies, and it really doesn't look very good. So it doesn't look like, it looks like a healthy diet may be good, but supplements really don't have a great play in clinical trials.
I see.
One interesting thing was the Cochrane database, and that's kind of, if you can't do a randomized trial, you do these meta-analyses which give you direction on where you think research should be done. Cochrane is well studied, well believed. It's trusted. It's trusted resource in medicine. They've done 3 meta-analyses of all the studies, all the randomized studies on antioxidants and fertility. And they focused on the ones that looked at the partners going through IVF, which is more of a controlled situation of an outcome than, say, a natural pregnancy, which could be anybody's, right? So they did that, and they found in the first study that men who take antioxidants, they didn't specify what kind, and this led me to develop one. Their partners were far more likely, 2 to 3-fold more likely to get pregnant with IVF, and 2 to 3 less likely to miscarry. And that was based on sort of overall pretty poor studies. So they repeated, that was like 40 studies. They repeated it, or maybe it was 20, they repeated it at 40 because they were pretty convinced it was going to come back negative this time. Same thing, added 40, they went to like 3,000, 4,000 patient studies, and they got the same data. And then they went to like 60 studies, 4,000 or 5,000 people, same data again. That was 2018, 19. So over 10 years, 3 meta-analyses trying to show that it wasn't helping, and it looks like it's always coming back as helpful, as there's some benefit. And my feeling is, I think a lot of men eat airport food, and I don't think they eat well. And I think diet is everything. So I think it benefits men.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, can it hurt is there such thing as over supplementing?
Yes, I mean, the complementary medicine trials have shown excessive vitamin A, et cetera, and vitamin E and things like that, it can have issues. But for instance, in my supplement, nothing's in excess. Okay.
And can you share I know there was a question about the name of your supplements again. Do you mind sharing just the website for that?
alphasperm.com.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Turek, I know we're running up on time here before we go into the Q&A, but one thing that I wanted to ask is, how could seeing how could seeing a male infertility specialist like yourself change their journey when trying to conceive? And also, at what point should a man see a specialist, when starting their family planning process?
So I would take the second one first, which is the same time,
Okay.
right? So I think our national organization recommends evaluation of both partners, and fertility is a couple issue. There
Yep.
is no reason why a man should not get evaluated at the same time. Maybe it's because a third of the time he's the problem.
Mm.
So countries like Germany and Spain with national health services, the man goes first,
Really?
right? Because it's a really fast evaluation.
Right. It's easy.
Physical, semen analysis, one visit, couple $100 to the system, 30% of the problem. Do a woman, 2 or 3 visits, $5,000, you know, add everything up, the hysterosalpingogram, all that stuff. And, you know, it's most of the problem, but you may end up finding the guy zero after that. So economically, it makes huge sense
Right.
for the system. I don't know why we don't think like that. Second is it's a third of the problem. Third is you can treat the problem lots of times, the male, and fix it, and maybe help his health,
Yeah.
and right, and make him live longer because he's doing something silly, then he doesn't even know it, and or cure him of cancer potentially. So 1 to 5% of male infertility has a significant underlying medical issue. Not very high, but you're not going to catch it if you don't look.
Right.
Now, the evaluation, I've got it down to 1 visit, which is history, physical, everything's done ahead of time, blood work, semen analysis if you need it, blood work if you need it, semen analysis for sure. And then I talk to him, and the key is to be fast about it and not hold up everyone's day or month or year, because the women are usually on a train track of timeline that they're pretty motivated. So I don't like to get in their way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get it done quickly, get it done efficiently, don't hurt the guy. And guess what? If you take good care of him, maybe you clear him, maybe he's fine.
Right.
But I also have data about that. No one really talks about that. Well, we'll say, well, you look okay, I don't know what's going on. I say to them, you look okay, you're not part of the problem.
Yeah.
Because in my evaluation, when I've cleared them, which means everything checks out, but they're unexplained, I did a study because everyone got mad at me and went online and said, Turk couldn't figure out what was wrong with us. And I said, no, I didn't say that. I said, you're fine. Spend your money on something else, because I don't take care of women and you're not part of the problem. You're way too healthy. And so I did a study where I had a USC resident call up these couples after I cleared them a year later and ask, what happened last year after Turk saw you? I didn't give them any medication. I didn't do any surgery. They had varicoceles. They had things. They were taking Propecia. They were in hot baths. I gave them advice. I gave them lifestyle advice. And the pregnancy rate naturally was 65% in a group of 35-year-old women with 1.5 years of primary infertility before they saw me. 65%.
Wow.
So I'm publishing it not as I told you so study. I'm publishing it as a lifestyle study. That's a lifestyle study.
Yeah.
They basically probably listened, made some changes, and things happened. And then we had a 20% ART conception rate with IUI and IVF. But, so for 35-year-old women, 85% conceiving in a year, it's putting you kind of at the benchmark, right?
Absolutely.
But 65% at home, I can't do anything to beat that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like there's really no downside to getting checked, both female and male from the very beginning.
Yeah. So the selling point isn't their health. That's the one that keeps me going. Like, I just got that guy to stop smoking. I just added 5 years to his life. Ka-ching, right? So that, but when a woman says I can't get him in, I think the statement is, do it for me.
Right.
You need to do this for me, because I'm very worried.
Yeah.
And men won't do it for themselves, but they will do it for their partners, and they will do it for love.
That's a great point. I think that everybody should take note. And I think that this is probably a good time to transition to the Q&A. And Dr. Turek, we did get one specifically for you while you were talking, just around vasectomy reversals. And so the question is, what can we be doing to increase fertility post vasectomy reversal? Is it kind of the same things that you're doing, if your partner didn't have a vasectomy?
Sure. So I would say, when I see men for vasectomy reversals, which is very often, several times a week, my favorite thing to do in the operating room, the only thing that matters, given what I've published and our success rates, is how healthy is that man walking into the procedure?
Mm.
That's all I care about. So my visit is not, okay, what does it look like? The time, how old a vasectomy is irrelevant in terms of our
Really?
ability to reverse it. It's all very good. But it's how is he been living the fertile lifestyle that he was when he had his first set of kids or at the time of the vasectomy. And the men who are doing a great job of staying fit, eating well, keeping trim, and not doing too much poisons, those guys do the best.
That's really interesting. So again, just making sure that you're living a healthy lifestyle, and that's going to increase the success rates of the vasectomy reversal.
Absolutely. And ultimately, the pregnancy rates, I think, are going to be higher.
Right. Yeah.
So live the fertile lifestyle. Don't stop.
I like it. Awesome. Okay, great. So I'd like to go back real quick to Dr. Maslow, because I know that there were kind of a ton of things that we didn't get to address after talking with you about kind of age-related fertility decline. So what is, one of the questions we received is, what is the average length of time it takes for a couple to conceive? And at what point would you seek further fertility testing or involve a practitioner? So kind of similar to what we were just talking with Dr. Turek about.
Great. I mean, those are great questions. Like really get to the heart of the whole matter. So essentially, there are some really cool graphs you can look online of what the monthly fertility rate is. And here, Dr. Turek did a good job of describing the difference between fertility and fecundity. Couples who are trying to conceive, if you look, it's really tied very much to the female age in the general population. So women, if the female partner is between 25 and 30, the per month fertility, meaning the per month conception rate, and this is going to be a lot lower than most people expect, it's about 25%. So 1 out of every 4 couples who are trying to conceive will conceive on any given month, even in our most fertile population, right? But what's interesting is that if you follow those couples, a huge proportion of them are going to get it right. Everything's going to fall in place, right? There's so many little steps that have to fall in place. But it's going to happen typically in those first 6 months. You'll see about 60 to 75% of couples will conceive in those first 6 months. By the time you get to 12 months, about 80 to 85% of couples. After that 12-month mark, fertility doesn't go to 0. It's not, even though we define that as infertility, the pregnancy rate thereafter is about 5% per month. So it's just dramatically lower. And so that's why it often is, that's sort of the cutoff, is when we say if you've been trying for a year, we get this diagnosis of infertility. Now what happens is that the monthly pregnancy rate goes down with age. So that at 30 to 35, it's like 15 to 20%. Under 35, 35 to 40, it's 10 to 15%. And when you get past 40, you're looking at less than 10% per month. So in some ways, you want to give it more time as you get older, because naturally the pregnancy rate is going to go down. But like I mentioned, the recommendations for earlier sort of not necessarily intervention, but earlier evaluation is because if you find something, let's say, like Dr. Turek mentioned, if you find that there's a third of couples suffer from male factor infertility, that's something you want to address before you spend 12 months attempting conception, when there are some lifestyle changes that could be made that potentially will increase your chances and not run the clock out, right? So
a lot of time, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of heartbreak.
Exactly. And so there's sometimes even just a check-in with general, it doesn't have to be the fertility specialist. A woman can see her OBGYN, a male could see his primary doctor, just to make sure, exactly, like living the fertility lifestyle is something that can have a tremendous impact while you're attempting conception. Yeah. And then, somewhere in that 6 to 12 months is probably the right time to at least initiate an evaluation. It doesn't necessarily mean you're committing yourself to a treatment or an intervention, but it's a good idea to start thinking about those evaluations, so that should you decide you need an intervention, you've had an opportunity, you still have opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like there's not like a kind of concrete time frame as to when you should go in to see a doctor about potential fertility issues. But earlier is almost always better, just because it saves couples, a lot of time and money.
Yeah, I think, it's a double-edged sword, because you also, don't want people to be there's really no reason to be concerned if you haven't conceived in the first 3 to 6 months. That's typical, right? There's lots of couples who that's not necessarily something to be alarmed about. And so it's this double-edged sword of like, you want to make sure that people aren't overly alarmed, but you also want to make sure that you're picking up the people who could really benefit from even sometimes simple interventions.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Makes sense. So I'm looking at some of the other questions here, and I'm going to let whoever feels inclined to jump in, feel free to kind of start answering. But a couple of these are really, really great questions. One that sticks out to me is around kind of the financial commitment of fertility treatment. Obviously, fertility treatments tend to be quite expensive. So do any of you three know of kind of ways to alleviate some of those costs? Any grants, or does insurance for any of your practices kind of cover the services that you all offer?
I can jump in on that. So
Sure.
there are several states in the country that have initiated state mandated coverage of infertility treatments. New York just started their mandate in January of 2020. I will say, to be perfectly honest, it's in practice a lot more limited than what it was advertised.
Yeah.
And so we are definitely struggling to get people covered under those mandates. But I think it's the harbinger of good things. I think as we move towards the future, people and companies are recognizing, and governments are recognizing, that this is the right thing, and it's good medicine, it's good business to have more infertility insurance coverage. So I think that's coming down the pike in a lot of ways. There are corporations that are offering infertility benefits to their employees through programs like Progeny and Win Fertility. Those have been actually quite successful in New York, in LA, and in some large, where there are large corporations. Those have been very successful, and it's sort of ironic that that's been a much more successful route than the insurance. And there are grants. Certainly, there are private grants and opportunities for people to apply for financial assistance. There are low interest loans that could be of assistance. So there are definitely some resources out there, but it is certainly a challenge, and sometimes a lot of good planning in advance can help in the long run.
Yeah. It sounds like, first and foremost, you should check with your employer, because I have a feeling a lot of individuals don't even know whether or not their employers offer this type of coverage either through their own fertility benefits or through fertility benefits providers like the ones that you mentioned.
I think in the world of tech, it's become essential to cover fertility in San Francisco Bay. Certainly that whole movement is spreading now. And that has butted off upstarts, fintech companies that just do fertility, like Carrot, Progeny, things like that. And that's going now because I think people finally realize that young people don't get cancer, they get infertility.
Yeah.
And it matters to them as much cancer matters to someone who's older.
Of course.
And it is their cancer, and it hits just as hard. And they're going to choose their job based on the coverage. And that's how Google, Facebook, and all of Twitter, that's how they keep their employees, because they offer them great bennies.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that realization's come through.
Yeah.
I was on the board of Baby Quest, which is based in LA, which is it's sort of competitive in a sense. You apply and they fund you and they follow you. And they raised money once, really amusing, on, I forgot, one of the famous designers of Italian clothing made fun of the LGBTQ society, community, and Elton John said he was going to sell all of his Massimo clothes or something. And so everyone in Hollywood donated their clothes to Baby Quest, who had a sale of, Madonna's outfits on an auction.
Amazing story.
Money. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's like, we'll take it, right? But, so they get funding. And so Fertility IQ is a new upstart San Francisco that just announced some funding for IVF. So look hard, search. Assisted reproductive care is a loan program. Future Family is a femtech. Femtech.
Say
That's
that
the
3
leading.
times fast.
That's the leading edge in Silicon Valley. Women doing family and fintech. PayPal's fintech, right? So fem, fam, fem. And they have $100 million of loans to give out, and they're competitive. I find that couples, when they go to secured loans or unsecured loans with banks, get treated very poorly. And they're honest people trying to build a family. They're trying to take care of everything, and they get rejected for loans for things. And so I joined the board of Future Family because of that. I mean, they were a fem, and I said, and I have programs with them, and I work with them, and they fund, and it's great. So I think there's lots of creative ways to do it, but you do have to look hard.
Yeah, you have to do some searching. It sounds like they're out there, and it's worth it to ask your employer, and do a little bit of research. So it's out there, but it takes a little bit of time and digging. So thank.
I will add also, for couples who are experiencing infertility as a result of a cancer diagnosis, there is a fair amount of funding available for them.
Yeah.
And sometimes those couples or women or men who have to do fertility preservation in advance of their cancer, there's not a lot of time, and it has to be done in a very urgent fashion. But if you know the right people to talk to and you get into there are resources out there for that particular niche event as well.
Plus, I have a nonprofit called Banking on the Future, which is part of Fertile Hope, not Fertile Hope. Anyway, it's called Banking on the Future, and it's funded donations for teenage boys if they're getting cancer, to freeze their sperm, make it as fast, quick, and painless as possible, because it's never really emphasized, but I call it the lowest hanging fruit in medicine, to get their sperm in the bank before chemotherapy or ablative surgery. So that I love, and it's been close to my heart, Banking on the Future. And also the military. So Robert Dean is at Walter Reed, and he's a fellow of mine. And so they help get the VA system. If you have a disability that caused infertility, you can get coverage for that now, which is that's a huge benefit.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So important. And we'll make sure, I know a lot of the attendees are wondering if we could kind of send over some of those programs that you guys mentioned. So we'll make sure to send an email to everybody with all of that information. Thank you both. So Dr. Link, we have a couple for you as well. One is asking about specific herbs, and again, not sure if this is just speculation or if there's any truth to this, but are there any specific herbs that can either hurt or help hormonal health and fertility? And then another one asking about fertility smoothies. And I'm not sure if that's a thing that I just don't really know about, or if that is something that is kind of like a fad right now. But if you could speak to those things, that would be great.
So to say broadly that an herb is going to help fertility, I'm not aware of one that's just going to boost your, chromosomal, health or egg health.
Yeah.
There are specific situations. So probably the best known would be something like myo-inositol, which is important, or it can be really helpful with somebody who has PCOS and they're producing too much testosterone and they have insulin resistance. And this myo-inositol, which is, I think it's a sugar, not an herb, but that can be helpful. So there's that. As Dr. Turek said, antioxidants are probably helpful. It's possible that CoQ10, which is good for the mitochondria, may be helpful. Those are some that come to mind. There are some herbs like berberines, things that can help with controlling your blood sugar. So, you could imagine that could also be helpful for egg health in somebody who's got high insulin levels.
Right.
So
nothing broad to ask.
What about horny goatweed?
One of my favorite.
Everyone's taking horny goatweed, all my men. Maybe it's just the name.
It must be the name. So it sounds like you can safely assume that any herbs that are like good for your overall health might also be, kind of beneficial to your hormonal health as well.
I don't even know if I would say that. Like, what herb is just good for everybody's overall health? I'm trying to think of an example that you could just make that blanket statement.
Garlic.
Garlic, yeah.
That's true, but that's a food.
Oh,
Right. So I'm thinking of something dehydrated and put into a capsule or, isolated down.
Right.
For sure, foods, absolutely 100%.
Right.
But herb wise, I'm thinking offhand. There's, maybe you could say fish oil, probiotics.
But those are more like supplements.
Yeah. So, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then
maca,
anything,
people, in terms of, if you could think of maca, which is also a food,
right.
a root vegetable, but that also can be good as something that just regulates your female hormones well.
Vitex berry I hear about as
Mm-hmm.
well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And anything about this fertility smoothie that was mentioned, or?
I don't know what that means. I assume it means something that's high in omega-3s and antioxidants and healthy fats, like what, of course, which, as I've said before, is going to be healthy for you in 20 different ways, maybe 1,000 different ways. So I wouldn't think of it as just fertility. Maybe if you put the maca in, you might think so.
I think it's better than airport food. It already sounds better than airport food. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like at some point in the near future, they're going to have to totally revamp airport foods in general. It's just
What about hospitals?
long overdue. I know. Schools. I mean,
Yeah.
so many places. Great. And then Dr. Link, there was also a question about where generally speaking, you're able to find out more about functional medicine. And then is there any way to make it part of people's daily lives? Which I guess,
So,
functional med, I would assume that if you're trying to kind of live holistically, right, it really just means living kind of a well-balanced and wholesome lifestyle.
I think that's a fair way of saying it. Parsley has a blog also. You can definitely find us on Instagram and read our blog and learn more about functional medicine. We have lots of specifics that come out a few times a week, articles that come out a few times a week. And but part of what we do at Parsley is we give people the opportunity to really get to know themselves very well. And that starts with our, really in-depth blood work to know, are you walking around with an autoimmune cells? Are you walking around with, autoimmune antibodies, or inflammation or deficiencies in nutrients, things that people, they feel like they feel well enough, or they don't feel well, but they don't really realize that the answer is actually pretty obvious if you look for it. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that we do at Parsley.
Okay, great. So it sounds like there are resources that individuals and couples can use to read more about kind of, holistic health and functional medicine, including the Parsley blog. But if you want something that's really customized to you, you recommend getting tested, speaking with kind of like a functional doctor or practitioner about that, and getting a plan that might be kind of more catered to you and your lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Awesome. Cool. Another one that I thought was super interesting was this one is kind of interesting actually. So how do you bring up the conversation of family planning and preparation with your doctor? And maybe I'm not quite sure exactly what this question is referring to. I think that if you're going specifically to see a reproductive endocrinologist, it's probably a much easier conversation to have, since these are doctors that are specialized in this space or field. But if any of you have kind of suggestions for how to start that conversation, and maybe what individuals should look for, when kind of considering family planning.
Yeah, I think I'll just start. I think if you are somebody who is, seeing your gynecologist in some regular fashion, your typical, appropriate screening, which you should do in advance of pregnancy anyways, but that's an opportunity to say, hey, I'm thinking about getting pregnant in the next year or two, or I'm not thinking about getting pregnant. What should I be thinking about? A good gynecologist will use that as a springboard to start talking about all the things we just mentioned, right? Getting, trying to make sure you are as healthy as possible in advance of pregnancy, in advance of attempting conception. and talk about strategies of, okay, you have regular cycles, you don't have regular cycles, maybe you should start tracking your cycles, maybe, all of those things. That's a great opportunity that a good gynecologist should jump on to really be able to give counseling. Now, the problem is the reality of medicine is that, gynecologists have 15 minutes sometimes to capture everything that they need to do, including all of your screening and, cancer screening and prevention, perception, and family planning, all of that. So it's a lot, but it's always a good starting point to kind of at least get the conversations going.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it all goes back to what each one of you have said in some capacity during this conference, which is, why wait to have this conversation when you are, like when you decide that you want to start a family? Like, this is something that should be talked about and addressed as early as possible. Just so if there is some sort of underlying issue, you're able to kind of address those those challenges from the get-go. So
yeah, I spend a lot of time educating about how not to get pregnant. Like from the moment they are old enough to hear it, we've been telling them about how not to conceive. And we spend as a country, as a race, we spend very little time educating women and men about like what actually has to go into play for a conception to occur.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I talk about that with friends all the time because I'm at the age where friends are starting to have families. And it's so true. You spend so much time trying not to get pregnant, and then it comes time to have a family and you think that it's going to happen automatically, and it's not that easy. So I have a last question for all of you. Last-ish question for all of you, and then we'll kind of wrap up. And to all the attendees, I know you guys have a lot of questions, and some of them are very specific to to you. So we'll make sure to follow up with every one of you with as much information as possible. But I just wanted to make sure that I brought up kind of the whole topic of COVID, and wondering what your thoughts are on the potential impact of COVID on fertility and family planning, whether that be from like a biological standpoint, things that, how this virus might impact fertility, or just from like a kind of social and cultural standpoint with regard to family planning.
Maybe I should start because of that announcement in the Chinese press that the receptor, the ACE inhibitor receptor, the ACE receptor that COVID binds to is found in high concentrations in the testicle. So ACE2 is a receptor that COVID virus binds to in the lung, but it's also found in the testicle, and therefore we should worry about male infertility. So it's not happening. So it is acting like a flu, and the fevers that you get will hurt sperm production while you have it. So it's like a typical influenza, which kills my practice in the winter when men get flus. Are you sick? No, not really. Did you take time off work? No. Do you have any aches or pains? Yeah, there are a couple of days where I was pretty sore, and yeah, I felt kind of ill, but I went to work and like, that was probably a fever, right? That's
right. People are so numb to pain these days.
Crazy. So I think there's no data that it affects male fertility other than as a flu would.
Okay.
Now, it comes on the heels of Zika and Ebola, which are, Ebola is not an influenza, but it's quite deadly. And Zika is not an influenza, but it's a flu-like illness. But Zika is different, right? So, the female end of Zika, you can talk about a lot, but on the male end of Zika, there was a mouse study in Nature that showed that when you infect mice with Zika, the testicles atrophy and die. So that's a little more damning than
yeah, it sounds like it.
But we still haven't seen it in men. And I had a big panel of CDC Zika experts, Ebola experts, talk at the American Society of Andrology and just have it out with all of us about what their feelings are. And I wrote a blog about it. And Ebola is a hard one because you don't live through it, and so they're infertile for that reason. But interestingly, both viruses, Zika and Ebola, will stay in your semen, Ebola, for a year.
Oh, wow.
You're cured. So there's a reservoir effect, which is another issue with COVID. Could be a reservoir effect. And there was an issue with Zika about the reservoir effect, which is why the CDC recommended, protected intercourse for 6 months.
I see.
But those, and so that's very interesting. But I'd say I'm pretty confident that COVID is not an evil animal virus when it comes to male fertility, other than the usual suspects, the usual
Right.
reasons.
It sounds like it may impact it temporarily, just due to like the normal kind of high fevers and stuff like that. But no evidence to show that it's going to impact any sperm health permanently.
Right. And, the same thing came up with Zika, and Zika didn't pan out either. I don't know if I've ever seen a Zika-related infertility issue, or I was fine before and now I'm not, or something like that.
Okay.
So maybe it is true. Maybe it's super rare. It's just off the radar.
That's helpful.
I will say in our practice in New York, we're seeing quite a few couples who are now coming back to do IVF or infertility treatments, and one or both of them have recovered from COVID, and we're not seeing a huge we're not seeing a change in sperm or like
Great.
semen, quality or fertility rates particularly.
Okay. Great. That's very, very
And then
comforting.
does the female end worry about any Zika-like issues with pregnant women?
No, so that's a great question. So there's some pretty good, I think, solid data to support that we're not seeing birth defects as a result of COVID. I think there are some other, so we're not seeing Zika-like birth defects. We're also not seeing what we saw back in like 2003, 2004 with H1N1, where pregnant women were dying at higher rates and getting infected at higher rates. They were somehow more susceptible to infection. We're really not seeing that either. But that doesn't mean there aren't some complexities that happen. Certainly women who get an acute respiratory illness in pregnancy is complicated, right? Because you're taking care of two individuals, the mom and the baby. So there are, in New York City, there's been a lot of cases of, women needing stat C-sections, sometimes at preterm ages, in order to recover from, give them an opportunity to recover from their disease.
Wow.
And so
is there
babies
maternal fetal transmission, anything like that going on?
So there's been some studies. There are case reports of maternal fetal transmission, but it doesn't seem like those babies are getting sick. In New York, we saw a lot of initially moms being separated from their babies or moms having to deliver alone. That was a big thing.
Very traumatic. Yeah.
That's come, now that we're sort of on the back end of the big, the real brunt of the infection, we're not seeing that quite as much. There is a lot of chatter about what kind of impact COVID is having on pregnancy in terms of pregnancy loss. There's always going to be a rate of pregnancy loss, meaning there's in the first trimester, the second trimester, unfortunately, full term, stillbirth, there's always that sort of baseline level. And it's really hard to know right now if there's been a spike or just people are talking about it more. But there are some large studies that are trying to collect that data. The sad thing is we may be a year or two before we really reflect back and able to see whether there was kind of a rise above the baseline. But generally, we're having couples come back. We've restarted our fertility treatments, and we just counsel couples, understand there's a lot that we don't know. Like we said, we don't think that you're risking the baby's health in terms of the risk for birth defects. Moms are not more susceptible to getting infected, but if they do get infected, it's certainly more complicated.
I think it's cool to have a coronial.
Is that what they're calling it? Great. Well, everybody, thank you so much. I do want to ask one last quick question before we sign off. It's not a super comprehensive question, but I'd like to start with Dr. Link and just hear kind of the one piece of advice you give or you typically give to your patients who are trying to conceive. So Dr. Link, why don't you start?
I would say that it takes a few months to get yourself healthy at a minimum. And so planning in advance and not expecting things to be, I'm just going to take these pills for a month and I'm going to be ready next month. Expect 3 months at a minimum to try to be in a healthier place. And then trying to get pregnant at that point is optimal.
That's great. And very consistent with everything that we heard tonight. So thank you. Dr. Maslow?
I usually tell my patients to really make sure they don't try to compare their journey to somebody else's. There's so much out there with social media. There's a lot to consume. People are stories, celebrities are posting stories, and you just don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And so you should, like Dr. Link said, have some expectations that it may not go exactly as planned, because your story differs from what you expected or from what somebody else is appearing. It's really, everybody's journey is unique, and you should do your best, although it's hard, to not try to compare yours to somebody else's.
Yeah, it's hard with social media and everything too. I feel like it's probably in this decade gotten much more difficult than in the past. So, but that's good advice. And Dr. Turek, to finish us off.
Eat well, sleep well, get great care of yourself, and let the best sperm win.
That's right. Your body's a temple. I like it. Good. Well, Dr. Link, Dr. Maslow, Dr. Turek, thank you all so much for your time. This was incredibly valuable. I learned a ton. I hope that our attendees learned a ton. As I mentioned, everybody who participated, we will kind of accumulate all of these questions that weren't addressed and make sure to get that information over to you, and then keep an eye out over the next day or so for the email with a list of the partners that we had for this conference, as well as a description of their services and some discounts as well. But thank you all for attending. This was wonderful. And again, I appreciate, all of the speakers' time tonight.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yes.
All righty. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.